everyone and welcome to another Cookery Club. Today we're going to be making cannelloni. The cannelloni is another classic Italian dish, incredibly similar to lasagna and again very versatile. We're going to be using these cannelloni shells, so you may have some of those in your cupboard. Like me, they've been in there for a while and I need to use them up, and that's what I'm going to do today. You'll also need some 5% mince. I'm going to use half of this pack, an onion, some oil, garlic. I'm using the pureed form, but you can crush your own garlic cloves if you want, and also a jar of passata. You'll also need a little bit of salt and pepper for seasoning, and we'll be making our own white sauce, but we'll deal with those ingredients whenever we get to that stage in the recipe. So let's get started. The first stage of the recipe is to dry fry your mince. That means put your mince in the pan without any oil and cook it off. At a point you will find that there will be quite a lot of juice and oil that comes out of the mince, and it's a good idea to drain that off once you see it, because as the mince continues to cook through and it dries out, it will start to reabsorb that. So if you're using a 5% mince, you'll not find very much fat comes out of it, but you don't always have to use 5%, and if you have any other type of fat, percentage fat mince in the house, then go ahead and use that, but just make sure that you drain that excess fat off. So I'm going to use, this is our 750 gram pack, which is far too much for this recipe. So I'm going to open it up and I am going to use half of it. I have my pan already heating on a medium heat. So I'm going to go ahead and add that in. And we'll just cook that off over the heat until it is completely cooked through and the light brown colour. While your mince is browning in the pan, go ahead and cut your onion up. Use a sharp knife to top and tail it. Hopefully my eyes won't water too much. So just cut your onion in half. We will use the whole onion. Cut down through it. But please ensure that you do cut this finely, because we have to remember that our mixture has to go into these shells, so they're not really that big. So let's cut this up nice and fine. If you're a bit short on time, you can always use your handy friend, the food processor, to speed things along for you. So why not go ahead and put your onions in there, and then whenever we have our mince cooked, we can add that in and break it down just a little bit for a finer pureed mince mixture to go into our cannelloni shells. That'll break it down just nice and fine, and that means that we won't have any problems when it comes to getting the mixture in there. We want to make this as easy and as quick as possible. As you can see, our mince is now nicely browned, and the next stage is, this is quite chunky, so I'm going to add it in with the onion. I'm going to break it down just a little bit more. And just before you do that, it's a really good time to add in your garlic. So go ahead and crush those cloves up. You use one clove, top and tail it, take the skin off, crush it in the garlic crusher and just scrape it off into your mixture. Alternatively, about 1 teaspoon of this will do, but again, personal preference, totally up to you how much you add or how little you add. On goes our lid. Let's lock it into place. And that's broken that down nicely. And then last thing we have to do is add in our passata. So we do need to use 2 jars of 660 grams or 680 grams, so that is 2 of these, but that's going to make far too much for me, so I am halving the recipe and using just the 1 bottle. So I'm going to add that in now. Give it a little swirl. And now that's ready to go back on the pan and we'll get it heated up. It's a good idea to make sure you taste it at this point. You might find that you want a richer taste, and you might find that something like an OXO cube, like a beef OXO cube, will really bring out a little bit more depth in this. You might want to just add a little bit of salt or pepper, or salt and pepper, whatever your heart desires to get that flavour that you really want. So that's my pepper going in. And now I'm going to add a little bit of salt. Way too much. Way too much. And we'll stir that and bring it all together. And you can see I've left it still quite thick. I didn't want it to be overly pureed. It's not the texture that we are going for with this recipe. So we'll let that simmer on the heat, and it'll be on there probably for about 20 minutes. Just checking my instructions here beside me just to make sure I'm telling you the right thing. So while that simmers, we're going to make our white sauce to go on top. So we're going to let our mix simmer for 20 minutes on a medium heat. Have a look on it, check on it, and stir it if you need to. While that's cooking, we're going to make our white sauce. How do we do it? Well, we melt the butter down in the pan, and then we add our flour to that, and then we whisk in our milk. And that will thicken up nicely, and that will be our base, and then we will add in any flavours that we want to that base sauce. So we need 50 grams of butter. I'm just going to put my flour in a mug, and it is plain flour we are using, and I need 50 grams of plain flour. But the first thing we're going to do is add our butter into our pan and melt that on the hob. So we want to make sure this butter is completely melted, so it's almost there. And don't keep this on too high a heat. I'm going to bring mine down to number 4. And the next stage is to add in our flour. Now you don't need to sieve the flour, just add it in a little at a time and start to stir that. And you'll see that it starts to clump together and form quite a thick mixture. So what have we got left to add? Our milk. So in goes our milk. Now don't worry, it'll look a little bit split at the minute, but as we continue to whisk, it will come together. Our next stage is to add in a little bit of garlic and herb soft cheese. That's where the real flavour is going to come from, and some parmesan will be going into this and then over the top. So we're going to be adding in 140 grams of garlic and herb soft cheese. I could only get the 50% less fat one, so that's probably going to help me out by saving some calories. But don't worry what one you pick up, it's just garlic and herb is what we're after. This is a 200 gram pack. It's one of the thinner ones, and we need 140 grams. So about 2/3 of this pack is what's going to go in. And that's going to make a really lovely, tasty, creamy topping to go with our lovely tomatoey beef base. And season as you wish. The next thing to do is set your sauce aside, but make sure that you cover it with cling film because that will prevent a really thick skin forming. So just remember, whenever you are making any of these recipes, or you do try any recipe, that a recipe has been designed with one person's preferences in mind, and they're trying to design that to meet a lot of other people's preferences. So if you make something and you think that was really bland, or I didn't really like that, don't write it off, or don't think that you're not good at cooking or baking. Simply look at what you felt it needed. Did it need a little bit more salt? Then go ahead and add some more salt. Did it need a little bit more heat? You know, have a think about what needed to be changed and try it again. Don't write yourself off, or don't think that you're not good enough to do this, or that you don't have the skills. Cooking and baking is just following a set of instructions, but you can always tweak recipes. So with the likes of these, I have tried my tomato sauce and it just didn't have enough depth. So I added a little bit of salt and pepper, and I still found that it just didn't have what I was looking for. So I've added a beef oxo cube into that. And for me, it is right on point. It's exactly how I want it to taste. So the next stage is going to be filling these cannelloni tubes. But before that, we need to take them out because we're going to put some tomato sauce on the bottom. But just while I have them like this, there's 9 fitted in here. And don't worry if you're only cooking for one and think there's no point in me making something, because I would never eat all that. Of course you wouldn't. We'd all be pushed to eat that much food. But 9 cannelloni shells divided by 3 would give you some really nice sized portions to go with your dinner. And accompanied with a nice salad, or some baby boils, or baked potato, or whatever your heart desires. That would make a really tasty tea for you. So why not cook the whole thing and then separate it into 3 portions afterwards? It's a good money saving tip, and it'll make sure that you've got something for those nights when you just don't feel like cooking. So let's get these out of the dish. And the next stage is to put this tomato sauce just on the bottom. So we're not using lots of it, it's just a little bit, just to make sure that the bottom is covered. And now comes the fun bit. So make sure you mind your fingers when you're doing this. Try and keep one end already in the sauce so as it doesn't run out and go to waste on you. And we'll fill that and we'll leave it down. And we'll move on to our next one. So now that we have that all covered with our tomato sauce, it's time to get the white sauce on top. So let's bring our pot back from the hob. So we have a nice thick sauce there. Just give it a stir. And what we're going to do is just pour this right down the center. And very gently just push it to the sides. And the final step is to add some parmesan right over the top. So this is a handy pack because obviously you can open and close it whenever you fancy. I would put it onto your hand first. And there it is, ready to go into the oven now. The parmesan's on top of that white sauce. It already smells fab. It's going to go into the oven at 200 degrees or 180 if you have a fan for about half an hour. And when it comes out, the parmesan on top will just brown up nicely and it'll get that really crispy golden look to it. So let's get this in the oven and see what it looks like when it comes out. Hopefully it doesn't overflow everywhere. Okay, so it's time to get this out of the oven and it looks good. Albeit a little bit overflowing, but don't judge me. I like my dishes absolutely filled to the brim. So let's see how it looks. So a little bit of a tidy up. And it smells so good. It looks like it's going to be a really tasty meal for us this evening. So we've got our tomato sauce on the bottom, followed by our stuffed cannelloni tubes, and then a little bit more tomato sauce topped with our garlic and herb white sauce with some parmesan on top. Now don't forget what I said, you can split that up. It can do 2 meals, it could do 3 meals, just depending on how much you eat and your portion sizes. So have a great week and see you next week for another Cookery Club.